Welcome back to my drone build series where I've been walking you through over the past 15 or so videos all the steps that I've taken to put together my large hexacopter. Today's video, I'm nearing the end of the build phase where this is the last component. A lot of people have been emailing and sending me comments asking, what camera are you going to use? What gimbal are you going to use? And it's taken me a while to sort through all the options, but I finally landed and ordered the parts for the different components that I'm going to walk you through in this build. Specifically, I've got a Gremsy T7 Gimbal that I'm going to show you how to attach into the drone, and we're going to set this up, walk through the firmware and tuning updates and so forth. And that gimbal is nice in that it carries about I don't remember exactly, I think 5 to 7 pounds I can put on it. So it's a nice strong gimbal. It's much better than some of the cheaper ones that I've ordered in the past off Amazon and so forth. The other component is this Sony A6500 camera. So this is it's a 24 megapixel camera. It's going to have a 128 gigabyte SD card in it, and from what I've read online, I haven't actually connected it yet. It has all the pieces needed to connect it to the gimbal. So there's an HDMI output port in there, and there is I can supply power to it, and also a USB connection and some sort of hot shoe plate up at the top that theoretically will let me mount this nicely to the camera or to the gimbal and connect the electronics so that ultimately it all is controlled through the flight controller, so that in Mission Planner I can trigger the taking of pictures at different intervals so that I can do some of the different surveying and photogrammetry type of exercises that I want to play with. The other piece that kind of glues us together is going to be this AirPixel, I think it's called the Air Commander Entire R3. And this little device is what actually communicates with the camera. So this will have a connection through the Gremsy gimbal all the way up to the flight controller, and then the other components in this will talk to the camera to trigger it to take a picture. And I believe it can actually stamp the pictures with the GPS coordinates and stuff then as well to make it easier to load into different software and process your images. So those are the core three components. I'll throw you over on the bench in a minute here, show you kind of the detailed pieces. There's going to be an SD card, there's some wires that I want to show you, and I'll kind of give you the whole inventory of everything that you're going to need to set this up. So should be a fun one, kind of the last build exercise that we need to go through, and then the drone physically, the frame and all its electronics is complete. So we'll get into more tuning and flying and stuff later. So come on over to the bench and we'll get started. Okay, so let's first walk through all the components that we're going to need for this build. I've got them all laid out in front of me, and I'll walk through them kind of piece by piece here. So starting from the top, and actually there's two pieces that are missing that I showed in my last video. There is the Gremsy dampening plate, which is already mounted to my drone. After we shoot this segment here, I'll show you a close-up of where that mounts. But you need that to be able to mount the first piece, the HDMI Hyper Quick Release. Now this thing will screw in at the top to your dampening plate, okay? And it has the connections that are going to come out of your flight controller for things like power and HDMI, and it also has serial ports, a serial port connection that I connected to the core carrier board in my drone. And so you need this component, and this has already been wired up in my drone and attached to the dampening plate. Okay, specifically in my drone, I got an HDMI cable, micro HDMI, that connected from here to the air unit. And then I got power coming to this thing straight from the battery. Okay, it takes up to 52 volts. So with my 12S battery, it's okay. You don't need to connect this USB port. That's for your firmware upgrades and tuning. And then, actually, sorry, I said to power. This is the power connection here. I pointed to a different one earlier. And that's really it, right? So 3 connections going to my drone. The power connection, the micro HDMI, and the serial connection. Okay. So the other piece you'll need then too is your gimbal itself. Okay. And this looks like this. Has lots of adjustments with these different kind of connections here, so you can tune it and dial it in and position things so that your camera mounts in there well. Now this gimbal, let's see if I can show this. At the top of the gimbal there is a white line, okay, and at the top of the HDMI Hyper quick release there's a white line. You need to line those up, and then when you're mounting this thing, you're going to twist. Okay, so you're going to twist this bottom part here, and that locks it into place. Okay, so I twisted this kind of textured area here. Now to release it, you hold this button on the side and you just twist back to the beginning, and it kind of lifts it up and it comes off. So this will be permanently mounted to your drone, but you can then easily and quickly take your gimbal off and all the expensive cameras and so forth. What's nice about that is all those connections run through on the gimbal to the bottom. Okay, and at the bottom of the gimbal where your camera mounts over here is the HDMI connection that will go into your camera, the extra pins and data that will control things like the Air Commander, and then you got your power connection, 14.5 volts coming out of here. There's a BEC built into this gimbal that you can then use this 14.5 volt out to power your camera, so you don't need a battery all the time. Okay, so that's what the gimbal looks like. And I guess to continue with the components that are needed, the camera itself. So this component here actually slides into the bottom of the gimbal. It'll slide in over here and gives you a nice spot with a 1/4-inch screw that you can mount your camera to. Okay, so we're going to end up using that in a little bit here. Now for the camera itself, I ordered this off eBay, so it came without a whole lot of extras. It's got the camera, and then inside here at the bottom is where your battery goes. Mine came with this little charger that I can plug to a USB connection and 2 batteries. The batteries simply go in, they slide in, and there's this little purple latch here that will hold it, so if I hit that it can pop the battery back out. And then inside here, off to the left hand side, there's an SD card. So if I click that, right, I can actually get the SD card to pop out. Okay, and in here I use the SanDisk 128 gigabyte SD card. To put it back in, just do that. When you close this lid, there's a little latch here that you're going to push over to kind of lock it into place. This is the bottom of the camera. Your 1/4-inch screw mounts there. I did also buy a screen protector. So this is just a basic screen protector. Search for Sony A6500 on Amazon, and it was like $5 or $6, and it just sticks to here. So figured it would protect the screen a little bit more. Now the other thing that this camera came with that I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to control from the flight controller and my HereLink controller, it came with this power zoom lens. Okay, so my hope is that remotely I can change the zoom level of this camera and zoom in on targets. Now to attach and detach your lenses, there's a little button down here where my thumb is. You press that and then you can just kind of rotate counterclockwise and your whole lens comes off. And that's what that looks like. So you can change your lenses pretty easily. And to put it back on, you just you got to line up the white dot with the white dot here, and then rotate clockwise. Okay, and that will lock the lens in place. All right, so kind of looks like that. All right, here's a close-up of the micro, or of the SD card. It's not micro SD, it's actually just SD of the card that I got. and put in this drone. SanDisk 128 gigabyte Extreme Pro. Okay. What else? I bought a cage for the camera. So I wanted a nice way to mount this to the gimbal. And I did not like that my only mounting point to the gimbal from the camera itself was a 1/4-inch screw at the bottom and no other attachment points. The camera was rotating and not super tight. So this cage is actually going to sit here and go around the entire camera. And this is linked in the bill of materials. I got it off of Amazon. And what it'll let me do is mount the cage at these points here, at the screw holes where the strap attaches. Actually, there's just one on this side. And then it will let me mount it at the bottom as well with the 1/4-inch screw. And those 2 points together will kind of hold this thing in here nice and stable and not let it mount. Now what that lets me do then too is it gives me this cage with all these 1/4-inch screws around the top and the 1/4-inch screws around the bottom. So I'm going to be able to mount this to the gimbal then by putting a screw in from the gimbal to the cage in the top and the bottom. So I'll have 2 solid attachment points here, and it should be able to keep it from rotating and keep it nice and stable during flight. Okay. This cage I bought was from a company called Nicey Rig. So that's what I found on Amazon. There's another component that I got as well that I think it's just called a USB clip or something. So this actually attaches to the side of the cage. Okay, so I can screw it in there and I can move this clip around. But the theory is I'm going to have on the side of the camera HDMI cables and USB cables coming out of it, and I wanted those to be locked in place and solid and not bouncing around. So this is going to clip to those cables and hold them and give it kind of like a stress relief point, and then it will screw to the side of that cage. This again is a component by Nicey Rig as well, and is designed to work with their cage. And then lastly is this Air Commander entire R3 device from AirPixel. And this is a nice little unit. Came in a bag with all the cables. I bought this from IR-Lock. And what this will let me do is trigger the camera and stamp images with GPS coordinates. And theoretically, it will let me control all the aspects of the camera as well, zoom and so forth, I'm hoping. Haven't tried it yet, so I still got to figure out if that's a reality. With this with this AirPixel, it's going to mount somewhere to the bottom of the gimbal. It also has Wi-Fi, so I can connect to this wirelessly and configure it from my computer, but also I think it can connect wirelessly to the camera to allow it to talk wirelessly to that device and control it. Not quite sure on that yet. There's also USB connections and stuff that come out of it. Now this AirPixel device has a micro SD card slot, so I bought a 128 gigabyte micro SD card that's going to go into it. I think that is used to store the GPS information as it takes pictures. I'm not sure if the picture itself gets stored on this micro SD card. That's something I need to learn. I think the way this works, and we'll confirm it later, is that when it takes a picture, it stamps on the entire micro SD card the GPS and positioning information of the gimbal, like it'll supposedly log the angle and so forth. And then all of that can be married up with your images later so that you know the exact angle of the gimbal, the altitude of your drone, the GPS position of where that picture was taken. Okay. And the last component This is a wiring kit from AirPixel as well, the Gremsy Evo wiring set. This worked for the T7 as well. And what this gives you is, instead of having to make all these wires yourself, it'll give you a nice little kit of the different wires that you need. For example, I also get a BEC that will connect right up into the gimbal itself. So this JR connector here will connect to the bottom of the gimbal and the Gremsy port, and then it can be used to power the entire. Okay, so it just plugs into the power port over here on the entire. So those are the components we need. We'll get started putting this together and trying to mount the camera and set it up and tune it. Let me do a quick shot and show you what the bottom of my drone looks like right now, where I have the HDMI Hyper Quick Release and dampening plate already mounted, and then we'll get started putting this stuff together. Okay, so real quick from the bottom of the drone, there's a shot of the dampening plate. It mounts to your carbon fiber tubes and through these nice little kind of clips that screw to it, has vibration dampeners, and then the plate itself is very high quality, and you can see that the HDMI Hyper Quick Release just screws right to it. There's my wiring. So I have a serial connection that goes to the core carrier board, I believe to the telemetry 2 port. And there's the power connection. And then lastly in the front is the HDMI connection. Okay. And so this is what that looks like mounted. I realize this isn't the greatest picture, but I promise you it's super easy to mount this gimbal or dampening plate to it. See these screws right here? All that does is you unscrew it and this thing flips up and it unclamps from your carbon fiber tubes, your payload tubes on your drone. These are just standard 12mm tubes that are on it, and so I think it's compatible with a wide range of different types of drones if you wanted to use the same dampening plate elsewhere. And it has a variety of adjustment options to be able to easily fit to the width of your payload tubes. So that's that. Let's get started with putting the camera and gimbal and such together. The first thing I want to set up here is our camera and our cage. So we're going to walk through the basics of getting this thing configured the way it should be to mount it to our drone. So first thing we want to do is we're going to grab our camera. This is just the housing itself, and here is the Sony power zoom lens that I bought with it as well. Okay, so I'm going to connect that, and you do that by aligning these white dots at the top, white dot there, white dot here. It will align in, and I'm going to rotate it to the right, and you'll hear it click and snap, and it's in. Okay, now from the bottom, there's a little switch here. You can slide that, and it'll pop open that tray. I'm going to take our SD card, and you're going to take it with the label facing out or facing to the right here. Okay, and your pins are going to be facing towards where the battery goes, and we're going to just push that in, push it all the way down until it clicks. And then lastly, take one of your batteries, and you can see inside where the pins are off to the lower right here, and on your battery it will have a section where there's pins. You align those and just push your battery in. Okay, and kind of got to push it out of the way of this little purple latch here, so I push it up and push it down, and that purple latch will pop back out and hold it in place. Now you can close this lid and slide that switch to lock it in place. So that gets your camera ready to go. And again, if you wanted to power it on, make sure it works. There's a switch up at the top where you just flip that to on, and your camera should start to power up. Okay. We'll go ahead and turn that off. So next we're going to go ahead and mount this in our cage. And once you leave it off for 10 seconds or so, it'll retract the lens automatically, or the zoom lens. Okay, so our cage. This is that nicey rig cage. It's got a top, and then on the bottom there is a 1/4 inch screw. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set the cage on top here, and we're going to go ahead and screw that in. Actually, before I set that cage on, I want to point out one thing. On your camera, on the sides, you might have mounts already connected to this for the strap. I removed those already. It's kind of like a keychain where you got to separate a little piece of wire and slide it out and kind of rotate it, and it'll come off. It's pretty obvious when you see it. But you need those off, A, so there's nothing shaking, and then B, so you can use one of these ears to screw to the cage. Okay. So I'm going to take the cage, and I'm going to lay it over the camera. And then what I should be able to do is just screw this right into the bottom of my camera. Go ahead and make that kind of tight. Alright, so that's screwed into the bottom. Now the other point that you want to screw is right up here. Your cage would have come with a little, I think it's an M2.5 screw. You're going to take that hex head screw, and we're going to screw it into the cage. I'm going to loosen this bottom up a little bit so I can slide the camera around and get that to line up. There it goes. So that has now tightened down, and I'll go ahead and tighten this bottom screw back on again. Okay. So that's what that looks like in the cage. It's a nice top, bottom. Everything is still accessible. So pretty nice little device. Now on the right here, you're going to open up your ports, right, for your HDMI and your USB connections in here. And what we have is this is that other cable clamp that came from Nicey Rig as well. And you can see you can slide this back and forth a little bit, right? So we'll tighten that down when we actually run cables through it. I think I'm going to mount it right about there. So one thing I didn't realize is I thought this would line up perfectly, and it surely doesn't. So that's a bit of a problem. But let's see if we can figure out what it will look like. So for example, from my Air Commander, let's try this. It comes with a USB cable. if I plug that in, this might actually work. Give me kind of a nice clamp a little bit outside. So I'm going to mount it actually, yeah, I do like that. So second one from the top. And I should be able to then run my micro HDMI cable and my USB cable out from this and kind of just loop it and clamp it. Just as a little bit of relief. Not as nice as I thought it was going to be. I thought it would actually attach and mount right over these connections, but oh well. Alright, so I'm going to mount it. I'm going to screw this from the second one from the top. I'm going to put this cable back for right now. And that will allow me good access to my cables anyway. So this thing came with 2 1/4-inch hex head screws as well. And if we go second one from the top, I'm going to mount that in. And we're going to mount this one in. And I'm going to tighten this down. Okay. So that is what that looks like. Now my camera is in the cage and ready to go. And should be able to work on mounting it to the gimbal next. Okay. So that's what this looks like. Alright, I'm going to pause the video here and set up for the next activity of mounting it to the gimbal. One thing I want to point out real quick that you won't see very clearly by looking at the underside of my drone in the previous segment earlier in this video is that on the HDMI Hyper Quick release, if you bought the AirPixel Gremsy wiring set, okay, they give you a special cable that's going to connect from your cube, or in my case the core carrier board, to the HDMI Hyper Quick release. So the cable looks like this, and on one end you got your standard serial connection. This is connected to serial 2 on my core carrier board, and on the other end you have a serial connection, but it also jumpers out to, I believe, this 10 or 12 pin connector that goes to the auxiliary pins on the HDMI Hyper Quick release. So on the HDMI Hyper Quick release, the serial port is here. There's serial port 2 and serial port 4, okay, and this end of the cable is going to connect into that. And then this jumper, or these auxiliary pins, are going to connect to the auxiliary pin connection right next to it, okay? And what that does, I believe, is passes through the Gremsy serial port connection down to the connections at the bottom of the gimbal, I think. So I wanted to point that out real quick, and then this other side, the connection goes right into your core carrier board, into the appropriate serial port that you're using. And again, in my case, I'm using serial port 2. So I wanted to show that real quick because it wasn't exactly obvious by just looking at the shots I took earlier, and I wanted to make sure I call that out. That is something, you get this cable when you buy that AirPixel Gremsy connection set, so there's some value in that, along with the other cables that they give you, so you don't have to build all this stuff. But if you didn't buy that cabling set, then you're going to have to be kind of wiring up these same cable connections and making your own cables to do that. So, all right, let's mount the camera to the gimbal now. To mount the gimbal, or the camera to the gimbal, what we have here is, I got my Gremsy gimbal laid out, right, and I got the crossbar up at the top loosened up so I can slide it around some. And it's a little uneven, so it's not sliding cleanly right now. Go ahead and loosen it up a little bit more. There, the thing is not moving very easily. Okay, so I got the crossbar moved up. On the bottom, figures it just dropped all the way down again. On the bottom, you got this plate down here too that you want to loosen these guys up so that it opens up widthwise, and then you want to open it up so that it'll also slide back and forth. And you do that just by turning these levers here, or these screws that are built into it. So yeah, this thing is not playing nice with me right now. Okay, so we're going to attach this top bracket to the top of the camera anyway, so I'm not super worried about it yet. What I'm going to do with the camera is, in your Gremsy gimbal kit, you should have gotten a bottom plate, and here's the instructions too, by the way. So it'll kind of show there's a bottom plate that attaches to your camera and slides in this catch at the bottom here, and then there's a top plate as well. So your bottom plate looks like this, and there's little rubber pads on it those are what I'm going to connect to the camera. And I got this 1/4 inch kind of thumb screw in there. When you screw it through all the way, then you can slide it back and forth to position it. So I'm just gonna, I think, loosely attach it to the camera for right now, and I'm gonna go for this center screw up here, up towards the front maybe. We'll start there and see what happens. So start there. We can adjust it as needed. In fact, I want to straighten it out. Okay, so I have it like that, and now what I want to do is slide it into this bottom section of the gimbal. This top piece is going to be the death of me, I can tell. Man, why will it not move well for me? Take the camera out. The problem is it's not sliding up evenly, and it's getting kind of out of level, and so it doesn't slide up very well. And if we kind of jostle it up like that, there we go. Okay. Alright, this thing's back close enough to the top, so I'm going to tighten these down so it doesn't move like that on me again. Alright, so got our crossbar up at the top. It's not straight yet, we'll fix that later. I'm going to take this bottom piece, I'm going to kind of just, it's loose, so I can slide it around, but position it approximately towards the middle. And then, I don't know if you see, there's ridges on this that'll slide into this attachment. So there we go. And then your camera is in there, and it'll slide around. And what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to level the camera. I'm going to try and center it so it's over all the weight of the camera's over the crossbar. And then I'm going to go ahead and tighten these screws down to keep it from moving. One thing that I didn't know with these screws when I got it was they're spring loaded. So you can only move them so far before it hits something. And what you can do then is if you pull out a little bit, it pulls out a spring and you can move it, kind of reset it, and then tighten it down some more. Almost like a mock ratchet, kind of. Not sure if this one's going to work, though. This one I might have too loose. Yeah, too loose, and I was turning it the wrong way, and so it came out. So I need to fix that. Okay, so we got this one is loose. That should open this up. Slide that out. So I need to get this back attached in here again. Okay, there we go. So it turns backwards from the way I thought to tighten it. Alright, so now we'll take this again, slide this camera in, I'm going to center it. I'm going to go ahead and try and tighten these screws up. Okay, so then I'm going to take this other one, I'm not sure it's actually catching right now. No, it's not. I need to get this going a little bit, and every time I pull it up and try and move the knob back, it twists. So I'm going to try and see if I can hold it like that. There's like a little nut underneath it. And if I can get it just to catch enough, I should be able to start to tighten it down more then. So I guess lesson be learned, don't tighten or don't loosen them too much, otherwise they're a bit of a pain to get back. There we go. Okay. So now that's tightened up. And my camera doesn't move side to side or forward and back. It is a little bit forward of the bottom plate, so I'm going to loosen that up again. Just try to move it back a little bit. There we go. Okay. So I think that's about where I want it. It feels like it's in there tight. So now, my next step, you should have gotten a couple other pieces with your gimbal. There's the top crossbar. There's this little kind of thumb screw, and then there's a 1/4 inch, I believe, hex head screw. Okay, and the way I believe this works is you're going to want to screw this into the edge of this top crossbar. There's some threading there, and once you screw it all the way in, you can now slide it back and forth. Okay, but it won't come out, right? And to take it out, you got to pull it all the way to the edge and basically unscrew it. And then this can attach to this crossbar up at the top here. And you can then use that to connect this to this cage. And so let's loosen these back up now and let this drop down. And I'm going to maybe push that to the back. And then I'm going to take the screw and I'm going to screw it into the top section here and attach it to my cage. And then the last piece, I believe, is I can tighten this top screw down, which should hold that camera in place. And then I should be able to, I'm going to make sure there's at the same height. So there's measurements on the side here where you can see where each side of this top crossplate is landing. So it looks even, so I'm going to tighten those down. I'm just going to position those out of the way. And then I think the gimbal is now mounted. Now, This might be a problem in that if I want to go completely sideways, I can't, because that's going to touch at the top of the gimbal now. That clears for some reason. So what we can do is move the whole unit down through these screws. So if I loosen these guys on the edge, I should be able to push the whole unit down. And get myself a little extra space. So I pushed it, I don't know, I'm at 5 and then 4 tick marks, whatever the measurement is here. I think millimeters. I'm going to tighten these down. It's off by about 0.5 millimeter, so I'm going to fix that real quick. Okay. And so, let's try it again. Oh, I didn't move it enough. I thought I did. Let's go a little bit more. I'm going to move it up about another 3 millimeters. So if I push it down to 5, let's just try that real quick. There we go. Now it seems to clear. I think I got the whole gimbal spun over once too. I'll have to check that when I go to mount it. I think that's actually better. So the camera is now mounted in there, and I guess it's a little front heavy because the whole thing wants to kind of tip over. And I think one thing you want to do is balance this stuff. So I'm just going to push the camera back a little bit and we'll see. And it's kind of fallen to the right. Try and push the camera back a little bit more. Not sure I can get much more out of it. So from what I was reading, you want it to be fairly balanced when it's not under load, just so that it has to work less in the air, keeping it self-balanced. So you can see it keeps wanting to go to the right, so I'm going to push this, I guess, a little bit to the left. Okay, so now it's going back to the left. Push it forward just a little bit. Too much. Kind of like that. So it was going back. I'm going to push it forward just a smidge, and I'm going to lock it down. Let's try that. Yeah. So now I can hold it, and it's keeping itself pretty level. I like that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and tighten these down more because I don't want it shifting in the air. Okay, tighten this top one. And we'll check it one more time. Yeah, that looks nice. A little bit off, but I think close enough. So you can see it's not just immediately dumping itself to one side or the other, or front or back though. Alright, so the camera is now mounted to the gimbal. Next step is try and connect it to the drone and see if it at least powers up and we can get the gimbal operational. Stay tuned. Okay, I have my drone back on my desk now. Let's see if I pan it up a little bit. There's the top of the drone. There's my battery. Here's the front of it. And right below it, I got my gimbal sitting there. And so, what we're going to do is attach the gimbal to the HDMI Hyper Quick Release. So if you remember, that is here. And there's a white line in the middle, aligned with the front of the drone. So what you want to do is you're going to grab your gimbal and kind of flip it up, and at the front of your gimbal is also a white line, okay, at the top there, right above the T7 on it. And this thing is going to line up with that white line underneath your drone. Not sure if I can get a good angle here of it. It's a little crooked, but about the best I can get to show you. So it's going to line up here and kind of sit in there, and then you're going to go to your Hyper Quick Release and you're going to turn it. Okay, so maybe I'm going to try and remount this camera a little bit here. See if we can get it from that angle. So white lines are lined up. Hyper Quick Release. White line is in the front middle, and I'm going to push it up in there, and then I'm going to take this and I'm going to rotate it clockwise, and you'll feel it kind of latch and mount and click into place. And so that's what it ends up looking like then, where the gimbal is hanging from the drone and you can move it around and pivot it. You'll want to make sure that you have enough clearance from your landing gear and stuff for your gimbal to move in all the directions that you're going to want to position it in. So you may have to do some adjusting of your dampening plate positioning, or even shift some of these, the top plate and stuff around if it's not going to tilt enough. But that's how you attach it to the Hyper Quick Release. And then the next step we're going to do is we need to update the firmware on this. So there's a USB connection in there. Let's see. Mine is actually on the right hand side off to the front. And so I'm going to run the USB connection and connect it to my computer and then show you what the gimbal looks like from over there. You're going to need to power the gimbal on as well for it to work. So let me see if I can maybe show that. Okay, so if I come over here, I plug in my battery, this gimbal should actually power up and try to self-level itself. If your gimbal's way out of tune, it may start vibrating a lot, and we'll want to get it connected really quickly to tune it up. Now, you might have heard that humming for a second. That's the gimbal stiffness. We may need to tune that a little bit in the app. You can see if I push it, it's recentering itself. So the motors are now engaged in working. So I'm going to take this cable here, my HDMI cable, and I'm going to connect it in to the gimbal itself, and then plug the other side into my computer, and we'll go and start looking at the firmware updates from over there. So let me hop over to my computer and start screen capturing that and show you what that looks like. So with the gimbal powered on and connected to the USB port on my computer, we need to make sure that we get the latest firmware installed on it, and we need to install the GTune desktop app from Gremsy. So in the YouTube video link below, I got a link to my GitHub wiki here, and you're going to want to go on the home page here. You're going to click here to access the wiki and documentation home folder. So you're going to click that, and down below there's step 16. That's what video this is for gimbal and camera. You're going to click on that, and I've got a bunch of notes in here, but the first thing I want you to do is go down to the Gremsy GTune desktop software. You're going to open that, and it's going to take you to a page where you can download the latest versions of the software. So I'm going to go ahead, download GTune desktop 1.4.9.5, and it'll take you to, you click on that, it'll take you a page with the Windows zip file. So we're going to click on that, and it should start downloading. And now what I can do is view that in my downloads, and I have a zip file here that I'm going to double click and open. And I'm going to run that executable in there. Windows 11 is what I'm running. It kind of warns me that it's not a signed application. I'm going to go ahead and run it anyway. And we'll say yes, and we'll let this install. This will install a couple drivers to be able to talk to the hardware as well. So go ahead and just accept the defaults and let those, and we'll launch GTune Desktop here. And while that's launching, I'm going to go back to my wiki page here. Okay, here's GTune Desktop 1.4.9.5, and it auto-detected my gimbal and selected the T7, and I can go ahead and connect to it. When I first got this gimbal, it would not do that. I had to manually say the Gremsy T7 and connect, and it wasn't connecting. I ended up having to go to the upgrade tab here and installing the latest and greatest firmware. So let's talk about that real quick. I'm going to go back to the wiki page. You have to be running firmware 7.7.1 or later. And if you go down, there's a link here to the ArduPilot to Gremsy wiring. It also says that same thing in here, I believe. So here's, T7 gimbal and how we're going to wire it up. You can see here T3, PixU. I could have swore it said for the T7 as well that it needed 7.7.1 or later, but it was required for me. Yeah, here it is. If the gimbal firmware is older than 7.7.1, download the latest hex for Mio, Pixie, PixieU, S1, S3, T7, or Zio, right? And it tells you here how you're going to do that. You're going to go to the upgrade tab, browse, and so forth. Now, when I click here, I'm going to click on the T7. It will take you to a GitHub page. There it is. Okay. So we're going to click, and you get to the Gremsy T7 V1 version 7.8.3. The latest firmware is going to be up at the top, and you got a date over here showing it was published on July 31st. Now, I've already installed this, but the steps to install it on your gimbal are you're going to click on it to download it, right? So it's going to put that hex file in my downloads folder. And what we're going to do, I just copied the path up here by clicking in here. It's in my C users TimR downloads. I'm going to highlight that and hit Control C. So if I go back over to GTune Desktop, you can click this upgrade button here and then upgrade firmware, and I do manual upgrade. And in here you can select browse, paste in the folder that we were just at, and you're going to select that hex file, and then you're going to open it and walk through the default steps to let it apply to your gimbal. Okay, that was absolutely required to be able to get ArduPilot to be able to talk to the gimbal. Now, the other thing that we want to do is, let's see, we're talking here about GTune Desktop. So I want to go to the settings and I want to enable MavLink. And I also want to unselect the reduce drift by drone option. Okay, so let me see if I can stack these side by side for you. So settings, make it a little bit bigger. Okay, settings, and then controls, and then MavLink, and you're going to click on that so it'll enable it. The other part is this settings button in the upper left. You're going to unselect the reduce drift by drone pan axis, so it's in the position that I have it here, selected on the left. Now the other thing that you might need to do is tune the stiffness. So on your gimbal, you can go to the settings button and then stiffness. And if your gimbal is oscillating, you want to reduce the stiffness. And what I did was I increased the numbers one at a time until it oscillated, which you'll hear it vibrating. And then I reduced the setting until it stopped oscillating. Okay. And so, for example, if I up my tilt to 40 here, you know, you can wait till it starts oscillating. Looks like I may have lost my connection to the gimbal, quite honestly. Where I landed was a tilt of 30, a roll of 35, and a pan of 50, though. I'm going to close GTune Desktop here and see if I can reconnect this. Fire up GTune Desktop. I'm going to connect. Okay, so it connected. Okay, I can hear it oscillating now. So I'm going to back that off. I'm going to actually go down one more. And then the roll. So I'm going to back that roll down to about 50, and then the pan. Set my pan back at about 50 as well. And then I have my gyro filter and output filter set at 2 and 3. You can play with these. Basically, if your gimbal is oscillating and vibrating, you may need to dial some of these down a little bit. All right. So that's the gimbal setup. Now we need to set up Mission Planner so that it can talk to the gimbal. So I'm going to go ahead here and close GTune Desktop. And I'm going to unplug my USB cable from the gimbal, and I'm going to plug it into my Cube Orange. Okay, and I have Mission Planner here running. So let me unplug that real quick. Okay, I'm now connected to the flight controller. So I'm going to say connect. Now you will notice that in Mission Planner now, I get this extra COM6 42 camera showing up. I don't know. Sometimes I accidentally have that selected, and I need to pick the Hexarotor. So remember, I've got this connected to serial port 2, But what you're going to do to enable your gimbal controls, we're going to go over to the configuration, full parameter list, and what I want to show you, let me stack that on the side here. On this ArduPilot configuration link that I have here, it will take you to a page, a GitHub page with all of the settings, but down in the bottom, or towards the bottom, I have one for this gimbal. There it is, the Gremsy T7 Gimbal. So what you need to set is our mount 1 type. So if I filter over here for MNT1, and I want to set that to a value of 6, which is the Gremsy, and we're going to go ahead and write that. And you need to reboot your flight controller after you change that. But before I do that, I want to make sure my serial options are also set up. So serial 2, okay, and the baud is going to be 115. The protocol is 2 for MavLink 2, and the serial 2 options is 1024 to say don't forward MavLink to and from it. So now if I go ahead and write the parameters, and then I'm going to hit Control F and reboot. I'm going to go over to the Data tab. If you watch your messages, it should see the gimbal and print out a little information about it if it detects it. So there it is right there. You can see mount Gremsy T7 V1 firmware version 7.8.3. And it's going to keep scrolling. So watch your messages after you enable it and have it all connected and powered up. If you don't see that, it's not detecting your gimbal. Now, in Mission Planner, if you right click and you go to Customize, there is a tab for Payload. So tab Payload here, right? And you'll get this Payload Control tab down here. You want to make sure that's checked. And if you do, you can go to the Payload tab here now, and you'll start to see the positions of your gimbal, right? The pan, roll, and tilt values. And if you say Reset, it should take it back to home. But I should be able to now slide these and see my gimbal move around. Okay. So go ahead and try that. I'm going to hook up a camera real quick and see if I can record both at the same time moving. Okay, I got that camera recording. So now if I tilt it a little bit, you should see the gimbal start to tilt up. And if I tilt it down, you should see it tilting down. If I hit reset, it should bring it all back to center. Pan, we'll move it left. Pan it to the right. And then if I want to go ahead and control the roll, and we'll reset it all. So that gets the gimbal functional and reading the appropriate values. So let me pause this here, and then we'll start to figure out how to hook up the Air Commander as our next step. Okay, I removed the gimbal from the drone again and have the parts laid out now so that we can connect the Air Commander unit to control the camera. So the pieces you're going to need are your gimbal and camera setup, of course. You need a micro HDMI cable. This is going to go from the gimbal to the camera for the video feed to go up to the HereLink. You're going to need your Air Commander unit, of course. In the Gremsy to Air Commander kind of wiring kit that I bought. You're going to need the BEC that comes with it. You're going to need the auxiliary cable that connects from the auxiliary port of the gimbal to the Air Commander unit. And you're going to need this USB multi-cable. So that in my camera, it's a micro USB connection. This is going to connect from the Air Commander into the camera. And then you're going to need the IR cable, which has an IR light, and it also has the connection that's going to go to the hot shoe plate. Okay, and lastly, you need the hot shoe plate that comes with the camera or with the wiring kit. The other two pieces I have here, I just have two pieces of Velcro that I'm going to use for right now to stick those to the bottom of the gimbal. So, kind of first things first, I'm going to take this gimbal and I'm going to flip it so that I can see the bottom here. I'm just trying to get it where it'll turn enough to let me work on it. Okay, so from the instructions online that I was reading, your BEC is basically, they're recommending you mount it to the bottom of the gimbal here, and the Air Commander, they recommend you mount it to this side of the gimbal with the micro SD card facing out. Oh, that's another component you're going to need. Sorry, let's do that right now. You're going to need the micro SD card itself. In this one, I bought a 128 gigabyte one that I'm going to plug into the unit. So we'll grab some scissors here, open this guy up. And pop this micro SD card out. Throw the rest of this garbage away. Okay, so our micro SD card is going to go into the air unit, or the Air Commander. So it looks like it fits with the label up. We're just going to push it in and it connected. Okay, the next thing I want to do is I'm going to get my Velcro pieces attached to the bottom of the Air Commander and the BEC. So I'm going to undo the piece of plastic covering up one of the sticky sides here. Okay, so I got that, and I'm just going to stick that onto the bottom of this Air Commander. Okay, so we have that, and then the other one will be the BEC. Get this piece of plastic off this Velcro here, and stick that to the bottom of the BEC. Okay. Now, in terms of connections, looks like, so I'm going to connect these. So from your BEC power connection, you're going to connect into the power connection on the Air Commander. So that's this top left cable here. So I'm going to go ahead and connect that in. So I got the wire kind of plugged in. Okay. And that's going to look something like that then when we go ahead and mount this thing. And I want to make sure I got enough wire to connect in here. Actually, I'll probably connect that before I stick these down. Okay. The next wire that we need to connect is this USB multi-cable. Okay, it's this micro USB on one end, and I don't know if that's an 8 or a 10 pin connector on the other end, but that is going to go into the USB multi-port on the entire. So that's this top right one here. So I'm going to go ahead and plug that in. Okay. The next cable we need is the auxiliary cable that will connect to the gimbal. So this is going to go per the documentation, and I've not tried to fire this up yet and see if it works, so we may have to change these later, but it goes into this Uni-C port. And so I'm going to take the cable here, the smaller end, and plug it into that port. Okay, so I just want to see where the pins are at. The pins are on the bottom, so I'm going to plug it in like so. Just want to make sure I get it aligned so I don't try and push it in the wrong way and bend the pins. Okay, and then the last one is this IR cable. Okay, and this one is going to go into the EXT port, which is this top middle one here. And so for that, I can plug it in like so. So I'm just going to push them down, make sure they're all in there good. And that's what that looks like. So I got my hot shoe connector still over here, and I got the HDMI cable still not connected to anything. So let's go ahead and attach the UBIC to the bottom of this gimbal. And I think, I want to make sure stuff lines up well. So this connection here first is going to connect to the power connection at the bottom of your gimbal. So we're going to plug that in, and then I should be able to make sure these cable lengths are long enough. I don't want to stress the whole cable, so do something like that. I'll try something. Maybe if I flip it around. I'm trying to think of how I'm going to cable manage all this as well. Maybe I'll do it that way. That gives me a little bit more slack there where that power connection isn't so tight, and the entire is off to the other end. And hopefully, I want to make sure there's enough room for this multi-cable to connect in, which I think there is. Okay, so I'm going to take the entire unit, and I'm just going to kind of pull the wire somewhat tight, and I'm going to stick it down at the bottom here. Oops, I don't want it that tight though. Okay. Alright, so there's a little slack there in the power cable. Now we can connect up some of these other wires. I'm going to take the USB multi-cable and infrared wire and just set them aside. This auxiliary cable is going to plug in to the gimbal auxiliary port here, and then we'll come back and wire tie these later. But then our next steps are going to be connecting this auxiliary or this USB cable. So this might be a little bit hard to reach. This probably would have been easier if I connected this first, to be honest. Even before I mounted the camera, maybe. Sorry, I'm just trying to line the connection up correctly so I don't try and push it in backwards. Okay, so that's connected. So that connects into the side of the camera here, into the USB port. And I'm going to kind of run it through my little cable clamp that I got there. Now, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to run this hot shoe cable. In fact, before I run that, let's run the HDMI cable, because that's going to be a little bit bulky. So I'm going to plug that in to the side here, and try and run it through my cable clamp as well. Let me move this up so you can see a little better. And it's going to connect into the HDMI port on the bottom of the gimbal. Okay. And then I got this hot shoe connection, which it's a 1-pin DuPont connector, and it goes to this hot shoe plate. Now this thing, read the docs and look at it really closely. There's arrows at the top of it pointing the direction to push it in. I pushed it in backwards. Like this pin actually comes out the front of the camera, which I thought was a bit odd. The first time I was playing with this, I fit it backwards, and it's near impossible to get out if you put it in backwards. The documentation also warns of that. Make sure you get it in right the first time. So this hot shoe connection, let's see if I can maybe stand it up like this. Ooh, I should have put this in before I put the camera in as well. Alright, so I dropped it, so I had to go get a little pair of pliers here. So I'm going to grab it, and I'm going to try to feed it into that little slot up at the top of your camera, kind of right above the islands. I got it jammed in there now. Okay, so pin facing forward. This is definitely do this before you mount the camera. This is not easy to get it into that little tiny space that I got right there. Okay, so there that is, and I pushed it forward, and it is now locked into place. So my problem is now I can't get the wire attached to it. All right. I need to run this wire up. Well, I was trying not to have to remove the camera, but it looks like I'm going to have to now, because I put the hot shoe plate up in there, and now I can't access it because the camera cage is in the way, so I can't connect that wire. Yeah. So we'll go back to the drawing board a little bit on this, in that I'm going to go ahead and loosen this camera so that I can pull it out. Then I'll have to rebalance it again when I'm done. But we'll unscrew this top one. So I guess the good news is you can kind of learn from my mistakes here. I'm going to lift that up. I'm just going to tighten it down so it doesn't drop on me again. Hopefully I can pull this camera forward now. And I'm going to need to take this top crossbar off. Okay. Alright, there it is. Now I can access it. So, hopefully I can access it. I'm going to take this. I'm going to try to connect it on. And it's just a bit too long where it looks like I'm going to have to run it maybe under the cage. I got these tweezers. I'll try and see if I can pull it through. I don't love that. Yeah, it won't quite fit outside under the cage with the connector, at least. So unfortunately, I think this camera's got to come out of the cage. So let's try that. I'm gonna unscrew the bottom here. Camera now be able to release itself. And I'm gonna unscrew this side screw from the cage. Hopefully this camera lifts out now. Oh, I gotta undo the bottom screw too. Just needed enough so that I can feed this wire through. Come on. Okay, the wire is through, connected. Now, I mean, it's a bit long. It doesn't really work well with the cage. I'll try and see if I can push it under it some, but it's not gonna go. So every time I push the cage back, it's pushing this hot shoe connector back, and I don't think it's making contact then. Okay, so what I did was I bent the pin a little bit to the left, or to my right. And what I'm going to do now, because I did that, is I'm just not even going to run it up through the front. I should be able to run the cable behind the back like that. So hopefully nothing broke by doing that, but we'll see. I'm going to reattach the camera to the cage. Okay, put this back on the gimbal. Okay, and I kind of had this centered above it before, but we're gonna have to go back and, oh no, I broke my HDMI cable. I'm gonna have to order a new micro HDMI cable. I bent it when I was flipping the gimbal around. So I guess be careful with your connections. That just cost me a little bit of the problem I gotta fix now. I'm gonna push this back and then tighten it down. And then screw this top plate back on, right in the middle here. that up. Okay, and then I'm going to drop this back down so that I can screw it to my top plate. Alright, and before I do much else with it, I'm going to try and balance it so it's way forward again. So I want to push this camera back more. Yeah, be careful when you're doing this. I'm kind of ticked I just broke that HDMI cable. Kind of sucks I did that, but that'll set me back. I'll have to pause for a couple days while I order a new one from Amazon, I guess. Alright, so I pushed the camera back just a little bit, just making minute adjustments. Still too forward. Push it back a little bit more. There we go. That's looking balanced. Okay. So I'm going to tighten this stuff down now. Okay. There we go. Okay, so there is the gimbal and the Air Commander setup, and the cabling kind of all run. Probably zip tie it like that, and I got to figure out where this IR connector goes. I'm gonna need to pause it anyway and go look up where that is supposed to be pointed at on this camera. Supposedly that IR connector controls the certain commands that you can only get to from the menu. The USB control can't do that, so I think it might be up front here, but I'm gonna go ahead and look that up. So I'm going to order a new micro HDMI cable. You can see I destroyed this one, bent the pins entirely. And then I'll pick this back up, showing you it all connected, wire tied, and where this infrared cable goes. So, alright, a little bit of progress. We're getting there. Okay, since I paused and reconvene this video here, I want to show you a couple changes I made before I completely button this thing up. So first of all, I got this a little bit disassembled, but if you remember, I didn't know where this IR light goes. Well, right under the handle, kind of where I'm pointing my finger here, is the IR receiver. So I got to figure out, I'm probably going to rubber band or tape this thing here temporarily, but it needs to be near that IR receiver so that it can get the signal. Okay, now the other thing I wanted to show you is, if you remember, I had you put the battery in the bottom of the camera, right? Well, that kind of stinks because every time your camera dies, you have to recharge this battery and disassemble things and pull it back out. So what I did buy was this dummy battery off of Amazon for the Sony A6500 camera, right? And off of Amazon, it was this Neewer brand, and you just got to get one that supports the NP-FW50 and battery model. What I bought, or what it looks like, is this little device. Okay, and this came with a connection that it had. I cut it off, but it had this kind of stretchy cable here that went to some sort of power pack, right? So you can power your camera as an accessory if you're a photographer. Well, what I did was I cut that wire off, right? And inside of there then is the red and black wire for positive and negative. And my other buy from Amazon was a package of JST XH connectors, which are what we need to connect to the BEC. And I made this little unit here then. So this dummy battery is going to go in the camera, and the lid that kind of holds the battery in has a little grommet basically that you can pull out, and this wire will then slip through. And this JST XH connection is going to go into the BEC. So let me show you that a little bit here for a second. So if I flip this over, and actually I want to show you real quick to another change I made. On the prior video, I had mounted the Air Commander and the BEC underneath to the bottom. I moved those. They fit perfectly right under the camera. So I figured I'll move them here on top of the tray so that they're a little bit more protected, and in case, you know, something scratches the bottom, or I don't have a whole lot of clearance between the ground and the bottom of this gimbal when my drone was launching. So this just would protect them a little bit more in my mind. Okay, so now for this camera and the battery, let me see if I can flip this over and show you. So this is the BEC. I already pulled it out, but it's gonna Velcro to the top there. And I'm not sure if I can get this completely upside down. It'll be a little bit tricky here. Okay, so I popped the camera battery tray open here, and what I'm going to do is this battery just slides right in. Assuming I'm putting it in correctly. Okay, so that pops in, and then on this flap here, here's that little grommet that I'm talking about, and it just kind of pops right up. And so we're going to take our wire, we're going to run that through, I'm going to push the lid down, and I'm going to lock it. Okay, so now here's my cable coming out of the bottom of that camera. Now, this cable, the other end of the cable is going to go into the JST XH connection on that BEC. Okay, and it's the only one on it, so you can't connect it to the wrong one. So I plug that in, and it's going to look something like that. Now my BEC then, I can go ahead and just attach back to the Velcro that I had underneath it. And then this all needs to be cable managed and tightened up a little bit nicely. By the way, I got my new HDMI cable as well that I broke in the last video. So what I'm going to do is pause the video so you don't got to watch me painfully try and zip tie this stuff down and make it look pretty. But all I'm going to do is attach the cables, rebalance the camera and screw it down in the right spot, and just make it look nice. So let me get that done, and I'll pick up the video there and show you what it all looks like, and then we can attach it to the drone and see if it's working. Be back in a second. Okay, one other thing I just realized is really bad design decision is this placement of the SD card. So when this is all closed up and the camera's pushed back and mounted, I can't get at it easily and swap SD cards. So what I'm going to do is I'm popping it out here, and I bought this SD card extender. So on one end it looks like an SD card, and on the other end it has a spot for the SD card. So I can literally pop it in. Okay, that fits in there, and then the SD card itself fits in there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause it, take a couple minutes, and figure out where I want to mount this thing, and then I'll show you everything all wrapped up. One drawback is I'm not going to be able to close this battery mount, so I think I'm just going to have a zip tie around it anyway, just to hold the thing kind of shut. I don't want it to be too tight though, because otherwise I'll be crimping this cable and causing problems to it. So be something like that. So Let me spend a few minutes and figure out where I'm going to best mount this. I don't like the cables hanging, but I kind of want it easily accessible for a quick swap of the card. All right, I'm going to pause it and then I'll be right back. Okay, here's the finished gimbal camera Air Commander assembly. I'll kind of walk you through where everything is living right now. So first of all, the camera is mounted in the cage. If you remember, we did that, and it's bolted in pretty tightly to the Gremsy gimbal. Up at the top here is where I stuck that SD card extender, so easy access. I can pop an SD card out, change it, put a new one in. This one might be hard to see, but you can see I got a zip tie going kind of at an angle across the camera there. That is holding that IR sensor close to the IR receiver there. Okay, and then let me see if I can get a close-up of the rest. So down at the lower left is the Air Commander BEC, and at the lower right, where my thumb is the Air Commander itself. So I got both of those velcroed in there and held down pretty nicely. So let's flop over to the back so you can see what that looks like. Try and set this down and see if I can angle it a little bit. Okay, so on the back here, it's a little bit messy with all the cables. You got your hot shoe connector going to the top here, and that's bolted in, or it just kind of snaps in up there. This is where I routed that ribbon cable that goes to the SD card extender. It goes under into the camera. That zip tie that I have here as well also is kind of holding the camera door shut on the bottom, because that won't actually snap in place anymore. Okay. The rest of the cables I just kind of bunched up for the Air Commander and zip tied them to the bottom of this gimbal frame here. And that's pretty much it. I got my HDMI extender. Oh, this is a change that I had to make too. I am not using the HDMI pass-through on the gimbal anymore. If you search online, you'll see people getting choppy and bad video feeds that cut in and out a lot. And I was getting the same thing when I was testing this. So ultimately, I talked to some people and they all said the same thing. You just can't use the HDMI pass-through with the Sony A6500 and the HereLink ear unit. Nobody really knows why. From what I could tell, I don't know how to fix it. I would love it if it worked, but it doesn't. So what I did was I just took a micro HDMI. I got a 1-foot cable here that has, I guess, the female end. So I've got a male end that goes into the camera itself down here, and then a female end where I can put another micro HDMI cable into. So the part of the cable that was going in to the top of the HDMI Hyper Quick Release at the top of the gimbal, I'm just plugging straight into here now and kind of letting that cable hang free. I am going to try and limit the yaw of the camera because I don't want this getting all twisted up and ripping out in case I let it spin too much, but I'll have to see and figure out how to do that. So yeah, hopefully this shows you how it all came together. Give you some close-up shots here of the back, kind of the side. See if you can see the bottom there. So that's how it all ends up working. Oh, one more thing too. If you remember, we had to balance the camera, right? So when you hold it, it doesn't tilt and just kind of stays flat. Now with the battery, because we put that dummy battery in, it lowered the weight of the right-hand side, basically. If you're on the drone, right-hand side would be here. So what I did was I bought some of these tire weights, basically, from Amazon. They're just 1/4 ounce stick-on weights, I believe. Okay, they come like this. Break off one and stick it on where you need to add some weight. So I put those on, and I needed to end up adding 3 of them. And you can see right here, I stuck 2 there and zip tied it, and then I put a 3rd one on the bottom there. So that gave me enough weight on this right-hand side of the gimbal then where it is nicely balanced now. So that was another thing I had to do. All right, let's hook it up to the drone and show you what it looks like powered on. Here's a quick shot of the completed gimbal all installed. You can see where I had to bypass the Gremsy HDMI cable or pass-through port, and so I ended up just kind of hanging that wire there. Gimbal's all powered on. You can run MavCam, which is an Air Commander utility to control the gimbal as well. You can probably see if I can get both in the shot here. So if I move it to its left, I'm facing the drone, right? So you can see that. So I can move it in all directions, pan, tilt, and then you can also see that I got the video feed going here. This is that MavCam kind of utility that comes with the Air Commander. It's kind of cool too. So you can get up, you can swipe that up, and you can hit this menu button here and end up actually seeing the camera menu overlaid in here and using these little arrows here to control it. Okay, so we can exit the menu, go back to video, and here's the other one. If I hit that little settings button, I can go to HDMI 2, which that'll actually swap over to my Linux video feed. Hopefully, if it powered up correctly. It may not be working right now. There it is. So it's just a black screen right now behind it. It says fence requires position, but this is the graphical desktop login right behind it. I'm not sure if you can actually see that. But yeah, kind of working good here. And I can swap. So I spent a lot of time on that Gremsy HDMI pass-through. I could not get it working. I actually found forum posts with people with the same issue as well out there. So I just decided to kind of hang the wire like that. Other than that, everything else looks mounted pretty well. I can also with MavCam, you can press the button and it'll trigger a picture to be taken. Maybe I'm lying. You can also use this top wheel here to control the tilt or the tilt of the whole thing. So yeah, it's going pretty good. All right, so let me start to set up to show you the different settings to make all this work that I had to work through. Okay, so now that our hardware has been all set up, it's time to configure the software, including the camera settings, ArduPilot settings, the gimbal settings, and the Air Commander settings. We're going to start with the ArduPilot settings. That should be the easiest one, and we actually have to make some updates to what we did earlier in the video. So what I want you to do is you're going to go to my GitHub page for the drone, linked in the video description below. And you should land on a page like this, and down below, if you scroll down, you're going to see for details, click here to access the wiki and documentation home folder. So we're going to click on that, and you're going to get to a page with all the wiki pages I made for every video. Scroll down though, you're going to go to video 16, the gimbal and camera, and click on that. Okay, and here is a bunch of notes I made about this build in what I did. So we already talked through the 12mm carbon fiber tubes. Here's a longer serial cable I made from the core carrier board to the gimbal HDMI hyper quick release. But then here's where we need to start setting the ArduPilot settings. So I got set your ArduPilots at pilot parameters as defined under the section Parameters Gremsy T7 Gimbal in the ArduPilot config wiki page. So I'm going to open that up and put it in a new tab here. We're going to scroll down to the section that's towards the bottom for the Gremsy T7 Gimbal. And here it is. So we want to make sure we set all of these parameters in your flight controller. So Cam1 type, some of these are recommended by the Air Commander documentation itself, right? They said to set the Cam1 type, the mount default mode. You can set to 2 or 3. I haven't been able to find much of a difference. Since I'm doing everything through MavLink, I just set it to 2. Mount 1 options, I set it to return the gimbal to neutral position on an RC failsafe. Here's a couple pitch changes I made. I only wanted the gimbal to pitch up to about a maximum of 20 degrees, and I want it to be able to pitch down so it can to negative 90 essentially, so it can be pointing straight at the ground. I only let it go up so far because of some of the wiring stuff, and I don't want the wiring to get pulled too tight. So I limited it there. There's very rare times I can think of where I'm going to be pointing up with the gimbal anyway. Mount 1 RC rate, excuse me. That's from the the mission planner documentation. Set that to 90. Mount 1 type we did earlier. Set that to Gremsy. Mount 1 yaw, min, and max. I set those to 90 degrees, so I can go only 90 degrees to either side off of center. And that's so that, again, I don't pull the wires too tight. The way I had to run that HDMI cable because I couldn't go through the HDMI pass-through on the gimbal, it gets tangled around and stuff when I start to spin this thing 180 degrees. So this seemed to be a good trade-off. I limited it there. Feel free to change it to however works best with your build. Serial to baud, we changed that from the recommended docs to follow what the Air Commander recommended. So it wants us talking to the gimbal at 921 kilobits per second. And then the serial to protocol, MavLink 2, and serial to options. This in the ArduPilot documentation is recommended to be set to 1024, but I could not get the Air Commander and gimbal and the entire stack to work when I had it set to anything but 0. I think it needs to pass through the MavLink messages so that the gimbal and the Air Commander can see all that. Okay, so let's walk over to Mission Planner. And this is, I got it prepped for the next section too, where I'm going to start showing you the camera configuration. But in Mission Planner, I want you just to go to the config, full parameter list. We got all our params. I'm going to stack these side by side, and we'll just take a look at them real quick. So, Gremsy T7 Gimbal. You know, I think the very first thing you got to set, honestly, is the serial to baud. So we're going to come here. We got serial to baud is set at 921, and then the serial to protocol and options are 2 and 0. I believe to get serial to options and protocol to pass through or to show up, you do have to. Actually, I think you have to have serial to protocol set to something for the baud rate and options to show up. If it's set to none, you don't get the baud and options yet. So you'd have to set serial to protocol to MavLink 2 or the value of 2 first, reboot your Pixhawk or your flight controller, and then those baud and options should show up. Okay. So then that gets these out of the way down here. Let's go check Cam1 type, and we'll just walk through this list then. So Cam1 underscore type is set to 5. Okay, see that? 5, and that's for MavLink. That's going to let us control the trigger on the camera and take pictures. And then we got to change all these Mount 1 parameters. So we got default mode. You can set it to 2 or 3. I was playing with 3 there. We set it to 2. That should be fine. Right. Be sure to write parameters too when you're done. Mount 1 options. That is set to a 2 as well. So return to neutral angles on RC failsafe is what that's set to. Mount 1 pitch, min and max. So max is 20 degrees up. Min is negative 90 degrees down. Let's see, Mount 1 RC rate. Set to 90. Mount 1 yaw, min and max. That's down here. So the defaults are 180. So I set that to 90 and negative 90 to only allow it to go that far. And that's it. So you write your parameters and reboot your flight controller, and you should be talking to your gimbal, or have the flight controller at least set up to be able to talk to the gimbal. Now, the next thing we have to do, though, is configure the gimbal side of things, because we did change the baud rate that the serial port talks through. So remember, serial 2, we had that at a lower baud rate earlier in the video. We upped it to 921, so we need to go change the Gremsy gimbal to set that as well. So we're going to, on this wiki page, we just did this setting the ArduPilot parameters. Now we're going to go to the Gremsy gimbal configuration section and start to deal with that. So for the Gremsy gimbal configuration, we're still on the same wiki page we were on for the ArduPilot settings. We're going to be on this Gremsy gimbal configuration section that I'm highlighting here. Okay, so connect your USB port to your gimbal right now, and then what we're going to do is we're going to start up GTune desktop, which we used earlier in the video and installed that, but we're going to need to make some changes to what we did earlier now. So we're going to fire this up. It should detect your gimbal. If it doesn't, shut down Mission Planner and try that as a first. I had issues where at times it was detecting a different gimbal and giving weird results. So it found the Gremsy T7. I'm going to go ahead and connect, and it's loading the parameters and fire it up here. So let's stack these side by side now so that we can configure this. It might be a little bit hard to read. I'm going to make this gimbal big enough, this gimbal config page big enough so we can see everything. So first thing, we talked about this earlier in the video, but it's very, very important. Load the latest firmware. Click the link here. You'll go to the latest Gremsy gimbal firmware. Version 7.83 is the latest. Published August 14th, it looks like, or maybe July 14th. July 31st, I'm sorry. So you can check your firmware version by coming into this page in GTune Desktop, hitting Info. You can see I'm at 7.8.3 official, so I am at the latest. If you are below 7.7.1, ArduPilot will not play nice with it. So save yourself the hassle and just get the latest firmware. After you upgrade the firmware, if you remember earlier in the video, you do need to run the calibration. It's recommended per the firmware update docs. We also tuned the stiffness earlier in the video. But if you find your gimbal with the camera mounted is shaking, or it sounds like it's making a noise where the motors are kind of trying to move, you might need to increase or decrease the stiffness settings. So again, those are under settings and then stiffness here. And you can change these values and increase them, decrease them as needed. Okay. What we need to do, though, for all the latest config we did to ArduPilot and to make it work with the Air Commander is this section here. So we need to go to Settings, Controls, MavLink, Settings, Controls, and then MavLink. And you just check that, or you click it on MavLink, and that will enable it. And then what you want to do is come down here to the baud rate tab. And you can see there's a little toggle switch here. You need to configure COM2. So have your slider pointed at COM2 here. Set that to 921/600. That's for the gimbal to communicate with the cube. Okay. And then COM4, you're going to check over here, and it's going to change your baud rate. You want to set that to 230/400. That's so that it communicates at that baud rate with the Air Commander. Once you're done with those, go ahead and reboot, and you should be now talking properly to your gimbal. In Mission Planner or on your HereLink controller, you should be able to see your gimbal connection and its status. Okay. And then the other thing I did under settings here, rotation, I set the tilt up to -20 and the down here. So we set those as ArduPilot parameters earlier, but this also physically limits the gimbal. So if something else is talking to the gimbal that is not going through the flight controller for some reason, I've seen this when I use MavCam, for example, the little HereLink plug-in to control the camera. It's almost like it's not honoring the flight controller defaults or max min that I set. So I set them here on the gimbal, and this also limits the gimbal won't go up more than 20 degrees then. Okay. These values are opposite from what ArduPilot shows in terms of the negative sign. The negative sign in ArduPilot is down. On the Gremsy setup, it's actually negative sign. It means it's going up. Okay. And then lastly, your settings. Click here. Set the reduced drift by drone and turned off the pan axis. And that's it. That should set up your gimbal so that your flight controller is properly talking to it. Okay. So now our next step is going to be to configure the camera. So let me get set up to do that, and I'll start recording that section. Back at the wiki page, we're moving on to the next section, Sony A6500 camera configuration. And you'll need to be doing this manually on your camera itself, like physically on the camera, looking at the display on the back of it. Right now, for purposes of recording this video, I do have everything all configured, and I'm streaming my camera video feed through the HereLink to my computer so that I can record it. But you won't be able to do this until you actually finish all this configuration. So make sure you're on your camera, use your menu button and the cursor arrows to move it around to change these settings. So the first thing we need to do is enable remote control. Okay, so that's going to be up on your camera. You're going to go up to this toolbox icon. So if I start to move all the way to the top, and you can see I'm on the tabs all the way at the top, then I'm moving it over to the toolbox icon. And the reason you see disarmed and fence requires position is because I'm streaming this through Mission Planner. It just wants to lay those on the overlay right now. So just ignore this right now. But anyway, right on the toolbox icon, we're going to go down, and then we're going to go to the right so we get to the setup for screen. And there's an option here for remote control that I want you to set to on. Okay. You're going to do that just by pressing your OK button, and then you can use the arrow up and down buttons and the OK button to change it. Next, we're going to go down to the USB connection. So we're on the second bullet here. We're going to change that to mass storage mode. Okay. So if you hit that, those are your options in there: auto, mass storage, MTP, or PC remote. You want it to be mass storage so that the Air Commander can write the GPS information directly to your images. And then next, we're going to change your HDMI settings a little bit. So I'm going to scroll up to HDMI settings and hit OK. And in here, you're going to change the info display to on. Oops, wrong one. So this HDMI info display to on. If you don't, you won't get the menu to stream remotely, and it also displays some nice kind of, I don't know, like some of the status information from the camera that you would normally see on the back panel. If this is off, that won't stream to your HereLink controller and onto your video feed that you're watching. And it's kind of nice to have that so you can see if you're recording a video, you can start to see the overlaid status information on what it's recording. If you're taking a picture, you can see the results of it. And using the telephoto lens and stuff, you can see the like what position the lens zoom is at. Okay, so set that to on. Now I want to disable auto review, so I'm going to back out of here. So we're moving on to this next section, disable auto review. And then I'm going to go up. Oops. Close the menu there. I'm going to go up, and then we're going to go to the left. We're going to go to camera settings 2. I think. Let me check this. Yeah, so camera settings 2, and we need to find auto review in here. There you go. So it's on the display / auto review 2 tab. We want to change auto review to off. If you leave it on, every time you take a picture, it'll sit there for 2 seconds showing you the picture that it just took. If you like that feature, go ahead and keep it. I wanted it off so I can get back to a video feed as soon as possible to see what my drone is seeing. Okay. And then the last one you might want to change. You don't have to. If you go back to menu, and we're going to go to camera settings 1. So I'm going to go back here 1. If you go to this quality tab or option, this configures the type of image that you record at. So I set mine at extra fine right now to get the highest quality JPEG. I don't need the raw images. But you can set it to raw plus JPEG if you want both. It'll actually write 2 files out. So your raw images, they were like 24 megabytes each, plus the JPEG, which was another somewhere between 5 and 8 megabytes. So actually, I might be wrong on those sizes. It might be much bigger. I can't remember. And then the raw, if you only want the raw image, you could set that. So your raw images are used if you're using like an Adobe tool or something. You can load those in there and get basically a lossless image from what I understand. For me, extra fine, so I get the highest quality JPEG, and I can open JPEGs easily on my Windows computer and so forth. So that's where I'm at today. Maybe I'll change it in the future. Okay, so once you're done changing those settings, go ahead and hit your menu button to back out. And you should then see your camera feed here. If it's not connected to the HDMI port, you should at least, HDMI cable, you should at least see it on the back of your screen. Now what I want you to do is physically power off your camera, like hit the on-off switch on the top of it, because I found that when I just kill the power to the camera, for example, when I shut off the drone, the settings don't save. The settings only save when you physically use that on-off button on top of the camera. Okay, so please make sure you set it to off right now. Otherwise, you're going to boot your camera back up and none of these settings are going to stick, and you're going to wonder why. I wasted a lot of time there trying to figure that out. Okay, so that'll get your camera set. Now, the next section we're going to move on to is the Air Commander setup. So let me pause the video there, get set up to record that piece, and then we'll finalize the software configuration. Continuing on with our software configuration and setup, we're now on the AirPixel Air Commander entire R3 configuration section of this wiki page. So this Air Commander, you talk to and connect to through a Wi-Fi hotspot that it sets up. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go to our Wi-Fi settings down here, if I can get the toolbar to pop up. So I'm on Windows 11 here. I can click on the network settings. You can see my Wi-Fi. I'm connected to my home Wi-Fi here. If I hit this arrow, you'll see one entire underscore and then some random digits and letters after it. Connect to that, and then you should be able to pull up the entire configuration page. So let's let that connect here. And sometimes I've noticed when it doesn't have internet, or if the device doesn't have internet, Windows will connect and then disconnect. So sometimes I've had to do this 2 or 3 times just to get it to stick. I'm going to go ahead, there it goes, it connected, no internet open. So I'm going to go ahead and click the link here. You can connect to it by going to 192.168.10.1 in your browser then. So I'm going to open this in a new tab. And what I should get is the entire configuration page. So let's go ahead and split these so we can walk through both together. And you could use a mobile phone if you want to connect to it at the field. You know, just pull up its hotspot and configure on the fly. So what we need to do is, first you need to set this Uni-C port to MavLink mode. So this should say offline right now if you haven't configured it yet on your Air Commander. So if I click that, it's going to pop open a window. You're going to set that to MavLink and then your baud rate to 23400, just like we did on the Gremsy Gimbal, if you remember. Okay, and then when you click off it, it should save and it should start showing you then that it's talking to your Air Command or to your Gremsy Gimbal and your flight controller. You should start to see values here where it's showing me these hertz values and the pitch and yaw values. Okay. Now some other configuration I did is next in here I enabled geotagging. So if I go to the menu and then logging mode, I said direct EXIF. I want it to write to the images directly. So it'll actually embed in EXIF format in your JPEG images the GPS position information of your drone when the picture's taken. We also need to enable the hot shoe. So menu, capture detection, hot shoe sync. So that should pop up. Make sure that that's checked. And then if you want to, you can set your local time zone. So there's a section here. So if we go to menu, settings, and then down towards the bottom, I believe, is time zone offset. I left mine at UTC. I keep it in a common format for all of my stuff, and then I can translate to any time zone easily. So that's why I left mine UTC. And then the other section in here, you want to do your XMP geotagging. So under menu settings, actually under this direct EXIF features, there's an EXIF geotagging, which you can see my settings there are the defaults, and there's XMP geotagging. Check off the geotag roll pitch yaw and the geotag GPS accuracy. That'll write some extra information, some metadata into your image in XMP format that shows you the gimbal's pitch, roll, and yaw of the picture that was taken. So those might be useful in other programs in the future, so I figured I'd capture as much info as possible. And then the text log features, what's kind of cool with this Air Commander is on every picture, it will also create another text log with some data. And I set the format, I think I left this alone, right? Like it'll give you a CSV file with the image name, latitude, longitude, altitude, roll pitch yaw of the gimbal in comma separated format. And I also just turned on these other checkboxes because I just want as much info as possible. Might as well save it and figure out what to do with it later. So append UTC time, append the fix and DOP, GPS accuracy, and rangefinder. Let's log it all. Okay. And then if all this is working, you might have to restart your Air Commander, your drone at this point to make it all talk. But if you want, go to this preview GPS data at the bottom of the settings page. If you click that, you should start to see the information from your GPS through your flight controller coming all the way into that Air Commander. So it has my latitude and longitude. The altitude's obviously wrong because I'm in a basement right now. Roll pitch yaw of the gimbal, the frame, and then I don't think I have anything for the antenna offset setup. Okay, so you should see data in here if it's all talking correctly. Now, a couple other camera specific things I did was, I'm going to come up here in the entire configuration page. We're going to go to menu And then there's a miscellaneous tab. And under that, you have Sony options. So if you're using a Sony camera like I am, the A6500, you can change a few things in here. I have an optical zoom lens that I needed to check use slower zooming, because when I would zoom using the MavCam utility that I'll show you later, it was going from one end of the spectrum to another immediately, and I could not get any of the zoom settings in between, right? It was either all the way zoomed in or all the way zoomed out. I couldn't go part way in. So setting it to slower zooming allowed me to control that better and actually get finer grained zoom control. And then this one I'm playing with. I'm not convinced it's working yet. Send power toggle after startup. After the Air Commander boots, it will actually start your, it'll try and restart the camera through an IR command. I'm not convinced that's working yet. There are times when I've plugged this drone in and the Air Commander and the camera just aren't talking correctly, and I have to shut off the camera through its physical power button and turn it back on. I haven't figured that out yet. So that's something that I need to look into more, but that's my workaround for right now. Turn off the camera, turn it back on if it's not talking correctly. Okay. And then lastly, on your menu, you can do a configuration test if you want to. So you come here, configuration test, and it should kind of run a self-test. That's going to take a picture. It's going to try to write to the camera and connect to the USB mass storage, write the EXIF data into the image, and just make sure everything is working. So when it finishes, it should give you results like this saying that it's talking to everything, right? So everything is okay in this scenario. So we'll go ahead and close there. So that's the Air Commander setup. Once you get to this point, all your devices should be talking. So next step that I'm going to walk you through in a minute is actually some settings on the HereLink controller so you can get the latest version of QGroundControl. That kind of binds all this stuff together, so and makes it work nicely from your controller. So let me pause here and set up to record that section. Okay, this section, you're going to be installing a couple programs on your HereLink controller. So this could be tricky if you're not familiar with Android devices and phones and going into installing apps that aren't from the Play Store, essentially. So I'll try and walk you through it. I got a video here. The first thing you're going to want is the latest QGroundControl HereLink release. So if you open this link in a new tab, you'll see that they are publishing versions of QGroundControl that are nice and updated for the HereLink controller. The latest one as of this video is September 5th, version 4.4.2. So you're going to download this APK file and you're going to save that to your computer. What you need to do then is see this next link I got here, follow these instructions on YouTube to install the custom APK file. Go there and it'll take you to this video that essentially shows you how to install the video from CE or the camera software for CE. It's a nice video though, so I don't want to reproduce it. Sorry, I'm trying to get the instructions side by side here. There we go. Okay, so I'm saying follow these instructions on YouTube to install the custom APK file. Now what they show you in here, walk through this video and watch the whole thing and watch it a couple times before you actually do it. You're going to connect your USB cable to your computer. You're going to go into the settings menu, about phone, and then to the build number section. And you actually got to tap that. Let's see if I can find the part of the phone here, or the video. You're going to tap that 5 times. And when you do that, or tap it enough times, it'll tell you that your controller just entered a developer mode, which will allow you to install unsigned apps and apps that you download. Okay, so now from there, you're going to go to the USB debugging area, and you're going to enable it. So watch the video; it'll show you how to get there in your menu. Turn on USB debugging. All right. So now, when you plug in your computer to the controller, this USB debugging section will let you click on it and say that you want to transfer files or charge the device, etc. You're going to change that to transfer files. And what that's going to let you do then is in Windows Explorer, it will open up and let you access your drive. So it'll almost present itself like a USB flash drive. I'm trying to find it here. Yeah, you'll see like internal shared storage. And this video is Credit World Drone Market. So they produce this. Very good. You can see here, they're copying over the CE APK file for their own app. In this step, you're going to copy over the QGroundControl APK file that you downloaded. Okay? And that'll be on the flash internal storage inside your controller then at that point. So then you're going to go back to that USB debugging menu. You're going to turn off transferring files. And from there, you need to go to settings and then storage. And in there, it'll bring up a page showing how much storage you're using, the apps and so forth. If you scroll down, you can get to an explore option. And that'll open up a window that'll show you all the files on your controller. So from that Explore option, you should see your HereLink QGroundControl APK file that you downloaded and copied then to your HereLink controller storage. From that, you're going to tap on that file, and it should prompt you and say, hey, do you want to install this? You're going to say yes, install. Okay, and it's going to go ahead and install that thing, give you a little Android window showing installing progress, and then it'll eventually tell you that the app has been installed. You're going to go ahead and open it, and you will get the latest version of QGroundControl installed on your HereLink. Now, if you were to go to the apps, I don't think it automatically adds it to the home screen. If it doesn't, you just go in the lower right corner of your HereLink controller so you can see all the apps, and you find the one that's called, let me see what it's called on my controller. You're going to find the one, it's called HereLink-QGroundControl. So you're going to click on that little tile icon in the lower right corner of your HereLink, and in there you'll see two QGroundControl icons. One for the one that came with your HereLink, and then the new one that you just installed called HereLink-QGroundControl. You're going to just hold your finger over that HereLink QGroundControl app in that menu, and you're going to say add to favorites. It'll pop open a little menu. That'll add it to your home screen. Okay? So then that's the app that you will launch in the future. Now, the next thing you want to install on your HereLink is this MavCam utility. Okay? AirPixel Air Commander MavCam for HereLink. This is a nice little utility. I'm going to right click and open this in a new tab to show you. It will let you control your camera, and it's made specifically for the HereLink controller. So again, here's a MavCam HL APK file. You're going to download that, and you're going to do the same steps we just did for HereLink QGroundControl. Copy it to your device. You're going to click on it to install it, and then it should automatically run when your HereLink controller boots. If not, there's a MavCam icon then in your, if you view all apps, where you can start it manually and look at it. Okay. So from there, MavCam is pretty cool. It'll give you a menu like this where you can control your camera, your zoom, and so forth. It'll also let you configure this button or this wheel here to control the gimbal pitch and it'll let you turn this button up in the upper right into a hardware button to take a photo, or if you long press it to start a video. So all of that documentation is in here, kind of in the menu, so you can set up exactly what you want. Some of the settings that I did, so I fired up HereLink QGroundControl. I tapped on the gimbal settings in the top right. You'll actually see your gimbal information up there, which is kind of nice. Check enable on-screen camera control. I set the control type to click to point. I show the gimbal azimuth in the map so I can see kind of where QGroundControl in the map thinks my drone is seeing. And I unchecked to show azimuth instead of local yaw. I wanted in the top toolbar my yaw degrees to actually show instead of the gimbal azimuth. And then the MavCam setup, I'll show you that in a second here. You're going to swipe up, get to the control menu, and swipe to that's your control menu that's going to get you your ability to pull up your camera menu remotely, quite frankly. And then next, you can swipe right on that widget as well to enable the hardware, photo, and video button and wheel and joystick. So let me see if I can get a camera set up over my HereLink controller, and I'll show you what these things look like and talk through them real quick. To talk through what's on my HereLink controller, the software that we just installed, I'm going to try and video this and show you. I'm hoping it comes out okay. You'll notice on my home screen here, I have my normal QGroundControl and Solex that came with the controller and Mission Planner, but I also have these new icons, HereLink QGroundControl and MavCam, okay? And you'll see there's some little widgets in the down lower right. Those are the MavCam overlays. So that thing, that utility from Air Commander will actually draw this over any app you're running, so you can use MavCam on top of Solex, on top of QGroundControl, whatever, right? And so one thing that I wanted to show you is how I got these on the home screen. So if you click in that lower right corner, it's a little hard to get for me at times. There you go. So when you click on it, you'll see all your apps, and you can see I got 2 QGroundControls in here now. There's MavCam. You could just touch your finger to it and hover over it for actually touch it for a second or two, and it'll give you that little pop-up menu where I can say add to favorites, and it'll put it on the home screen. Okay, MavCam will start by default when the controller starts. Okay, if not, you can run it. You can touch the icon and it should start up and give you the overlay down here. All right, so let's talk through MavCam itself, because it's a little easier to see what it just does on its own without all the HereLink stuff kind of distracting the screen. So MavCam itself has some real cool features here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pop up the menu. It's not super intuitive. What you need to do is you need to kind of grab your finger on where it's got the 2 camera icons and swipe up. Oops, wrong menu. Swiping up gives you the menu to control your camera. I want to swipe right. Okay, so swiping right will give you this menu here. And you can change different values. Let me set the opacity higher so we can maybe read these. So that opacity slider that I just did, you can make it more see-through or not, so that you can see what's behind it when you're running QGroundControl. So there's your checkbox to auto start MavCam. I am not using the CD tool. That's for the C and D buttons to control it. I am using those for other functions on my drone, so I did not check those. But you can read the docs and turn those on if you want. It'll help you control your gimbal and camera through some different defaults that are built in. The hardware photo button and the hardware movie button I have checked off and enabled. What those will give you is when you press your button up at the top, you may have just heard the camera go, it'll take a picture. And if you long press it, it'll start a video. And then long press it again to stop video recording. So that's kind of nice. It just works and it's built in. You need to not have those buttons mapped to anything else though on your controller. If you do, it will kind of screw it up. So Just make sure they're left alone and let MavCam control those. The other things that I turned on are the hardware wheel and then the joystick setting. So the hardware wheel will let you use this wheel up here to pitch your gimbal up and down. And then the joystick, I'll show you here. If I exit out of that menu, it brings our tools back here. Our joystick, if you click on the little tiny gimbal button here, gives you that kind of thumb joystick here, or finger joystick you can use. You can actually use that to move your gimbal around. So I can pitch it up, I can pitch it down, I can yaw left and right and so forth. One thing I've noticed is this does not honor the yaw, max-min yaw settings that I have in, that we set up earlier in ArduPilot. So just be careful. This thing will go as far as the gimbal will let it go. And you can't limit the yaw from what I can see in the Gremsy gimbal settings. This is why I limited the pitch up though in the Gremsy gimbal as well. Because no matter how long and how high I try to push the gimbal, it won't go up more than 20 degrees. Okay, and you can see it's got a little icon there showing -18, so it's 18 degrees up. This little button there will point it down 90 degrees and bring it back to center, which is kind of nice. And if you tap it again, it'll straighten your camera out and point it towards the horizon. Okay. The last thing, I'm going to press gimbal again to make that go away. The last thing you need to know is this GTG button here, this geotagging. When you want to take pictures with the Air Commander and have the images get stamped with the GPS coordinate information, you need to press start there. Now I haven't played with some of these takeoff detection things yet. I believe it'll automatically take off or start on takeoff and can stop on land. I was just controlling it manually myself. When you're done taking photos and you landed, you have to come in here and you press stop as well. When you press stop, it'll go ahead and write the EXIF data to the images that it took. So let me show you a little bit about what that looks like. So we're going to go GTG. We're going to say start. And are you sure you want to start a session? Yes. So it takes a picture real quick with the camera and makes sure that it can connect to it. You'll see the status in here that's going. And your GTG icon down there is flashing when it's working. Okay, so status went to running and it's got a 0 next to it. And my GTG button is now green. So everything is functional and operating. If I press the camera button and take a picture, you'll start to get a little counter. I'm not sure if you can see it below that GTG button, the geotagging control button. It's showing me I just took 2 pictures. Click it again. It should go up to a 3, right? And if I open up the menu, you can see it a little bit more clearly as well. Running, and then 3 in parentheses next to it. When you're done, you're going to press stop. What that's going to do is run through the geotagging session. Your camera is inaccessible at this moment. It's actually connecting to it through the USB mass storage and writing the GPS information that it recorded directly to the EXIF section and the XMP sections of your JPEG images. So that is MavCam. Let me pause here and then I'm going to do a quick video showing you the HereLink QGroundControl. Okay, for HereLink QGroundControl, you're going to want to get in the habit of running the new HereLink version that you installed, not the one that came with your controller. So I'm going to press HereLink QGroundControl and start that up. And what it's going to do is it gives you a lot of settings where it's going to detect the camera, it's going to detect the gimbal, and let you control some of that through the software here. You can also see my MavCam overlay is still down there. So let's let this finish initializing, and then you'll see all the values that we can control here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this takeoff item here. The first thing you'll notice if this is working correctly is you get a yaw, like a gimbal setting that says yaw follow up there. and the pitch and yaw of your gimbal. Okay, and then what you'll also get is some settings down here where you'll see like a record button for your gimbal. That doesn't actually work. That comes with QGroundControl. For some reason that's not working. I need to use the MavCam buttons to take pictures, or I use the hardware button. So if you hit this picture button there, it will go ahead and take a picture of what it sees there. And you can see this is why I enabled the info display in the camera, because I want to see this information about the camera and the pictures taken and so forth. So in QGroundControl, when you click on this yaw follow thing, you'll get a menu up there where it has some nice features too. I actually like controlling the gimbal a little bit better through here because this does honor some of the limits as well. But if I go tilt 90 degrees, it's going to center it, point it forward, and then tilt the camera down 90 degrees. If I press center here, it'll go ahead and bring the gimbal back to the center. Now the settings menu here, you're going to want to check, I showed these in the wiki, the enable on-screen camera control and the click to point setting. And then I also have the gimbal azimuth in the map, and and I unchecked use azimuth instead of local yaw. Okay, so those are my HereLink settings here. I don't know if it matters or not, but if you go to your QGroundControl settings and you say application settings, if you come down here, I also checked low latency mode on these application settings. So, not sure if it helps or makes a difference, but I checked that as well. Okay, so now with your click to point, you can go ahead and point. You can see the video feed here coming from the camera. You can point and touch your screen like that box right there. If I touch it, it's going to try and focus the camera on that and actually move the camera. So let's move it to the right a little bit more. Let's look at those what do you call it? Let me put the leg up a little bit of the drone so we don't have that in the way. There we go. So now, for example, if I point at these pliers right there, it should try and bring that almost to the center. Okay, and focus in on it. So kind of a nice little control for your camera as well. You touch on the screen what you want it to look at. Let's try that rocket up there, and it'll start to move the gimbal to bring that in focus. All right, so now other things that you can do. If I want to take a picture, or actually, let's see, if I want to pitch, you can see I'm using the hardware wheel button to pitch down. I can pitch up, okay, and then I can also take a picture. If I use the button on the top right, that'll take a picture. I'm not running a geotagging session, so it won't write the GPS info to it. What else might we do here? So I showed this earlier. If you swipe up on the MavCam widget, you can get to this menu on the left-hand side here. And so if you hit menu there, it'll actually use the IR control and pull up your camera's menu. So this is how I was remotely recording it earlier, by broadcasting this to my PC. So you can use these arrow buttons to go ahead and configure and change the setting on your camera if you need to. Okay. But what's cool up here, if we go out of menu, there we go. If we go out of the menu, remember we got this rocket kind of in the center there. It's hard to see over that fence position. But with that menu, you also get a zoom control. So if you got a lens like I do, I got the power zoom lens, I can hit zoom and I can hit the plus button and keep zooming in more and more on that rocket. So I'm at full zoom now. This is why I had to use the slower zooming as well, and why I like that info display, because I get that WT widget that shows me my current zoom setting. So did that so that I can control this, and the slower zooming will make it so that I can get several kind of zoom modes. When it wasn't slow zooming, it was going from one end to the other of the WT setting there. Okay. So you can close your MavCam menu by hitting the X there. A little hard. The screen is a little small for some of this, I will admit, but it does work pretty good. So if I do my menu up here, I can go center and bring that gimbal right back pointing forward. You can see it's got my computer and some of the settings there. You can go kind of look at that GPS antenna over there. See some other stuff. Okay, so what else? If I click on the map, you'll see you can see, I don't know if the camera will pick this up, you can see the arrow is pointing forward at how my drone is pointing, but then off to the top right there's a little white triangle coming out of it. That's the camera azimuth, so that's like what it's pointing at and would see. And if I click to point on the image, actually let's do this maybe a different way. If I use the gimbal, so you might be seeing that white triangle changing as I rotate the gimbal here. And if I go down, it should make the azimuth a little bit smaller, and so forth. So that's how those settings work. One more thing that you might want to see is how to swap video feeds. So again, I needed the latest version of HereLink QGroundControl to be able to do that. When I installed it, you get this little widget here with the red button that doesn't actually do anything. I have to use the Air Commander in my scenario, but this little settings icon here, when I click that, that lets me switch the HDMI source that I'm using. So right now I'm looking at HDMI 1. If I go to HDMI 2, it'll take a second here to fire up that stream, but it should connect to the Raspberry Pi that I got outputting to it. And the Raspberry Pi is just a black screen right now. Ultimately, that's going to do some other stuff and display a feed for me. I got to write some programs for it. But yeah, black screen behind it would be a desktop icon, login icon, and so forth. So if I hit my settings and we go back to HDMI 1, it swaps back to the camera. So that's pretty much it. That's QGroundControl and how it operates on the HereLink with all of these components. The A6500 camera, Air Commander by AirPixel unit, Gremsy Gimbal, and the Cube Orange. So pause the video here, and I'll show you one more thing in Mission Planner. All right, the last part of this video, I'm going to show you how to display the video feed in Mission Planner. So we're going to go ahead and just start up Mission Planner. I'm running the latest beta version here. Not sure if that matters or not for what you're going to try to do. And it's going to see my HereLink because I'm on the same Wi-Fi network, this computer as the HereLink controller. So I'm going to go ahead and connect to it. Let's let that take a second here to pull the parameters and information. And so this would be useful if you're running a laptop at the field too and want to just get a bigger display. Maybe even output your video feed to a monitor for other people to look at. But in this section here, you can right click and say video, and then HereLink video. And it's going to ask you for the IP address. And I got this when I first connected. It told me where it detected that HereLink controller at and was going to connect to. So I wrote this down. When you type it in, 192.168.200.101, that is the IP address of my HereLink on my home network. It'll be different on yours. You'll have to grab the right value. Put it in and press OK, though, and you'll start to get that video feed with the heads-up display. So you can right-click. If you needed to, you can go to your heads-up display items and turn things off. If you want to get rid of the heading, for example, or if you want to get rid of the speed, it'll just start to make widgets go away so you can get a cleaner video feed. Okay. You can also double-click to pop it out so you can get a bigger feed if you want, maximize that window. If you close it, it'll automatically put it back in Mission Planner. You can swap it with the map, so you can kind of swap those two views as well. And so, yeah, I just wanted to show you that real quick because it gives you some nice information to display here. Not sure if this will work in the HereLink video, set video stream 2. Yeah, it looks like it did. So it's going and picking up the Raspberry Pi video stream. If I go back to video stream 1, there's the camera view. So you can right click and control these in here as well. If you change it here, it actually changes it on your controller as well. I think the HereLink only broadcasts one actual video stream. So you can do that and pull up the information and view it. So that was the last piece I wanted to show, and I'm going to wrap this video up and bring it to an end. Hopefully this helps you a lot. This one took me a lot to figure out. This is probably the hardest video I made. So sorry for some of the slow points in it. There was a lot to figure out and a lot to get working. But in the end, I'm pretty happy with how all this works. Now I got to actually get the drone in the air and take some pictures and see if I can build some 3D models of some things. So thanks for watching and stay tuned for the next video.